What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and we're back for another episode of the Fighting Game tutorial series. In today's episode, we're going to be going over more character improvements. In the many episodes preceding this one, we did do a lot of behavior changes, a lot of cleanup for our characters, for our game modes, for our animation blueprints, and we're doing all of these so that we can move closer to a lot of the mechanics that we want to tackle, and a lot of the big systems we want to tackle, such as rollback netcode, online play in general, story mode, and we're really getting to a point where this is pretty solid. So specifically in today's episode, we're going to be cleaning up the move right function a little bit, just improving some of the bloat that was in there. We don't need all of it to be in there. And then we can clean up some other parts of the code and even some parts of the blueprint today as well. So I'll leave that one as a short intro and we can get ready to hop into it. But before we do, if you want to get caught up in the series and see how we've done things like our projectiles and our hitboxes and our timer and our game mode and a lot more, I'll link you to the entire fighting game tutorial series right here in the top right corner. That covers everything that we've done in the fighter so far, and it's updated every Sunday. If you're just interested in having a clean character class and improving blueprints or code, you don't have to watch the entire series to do this, but I do recommend that you watch some of the previous episodes where we've been cleaning up our character blueprint and our other classes because they are incredibly useful. One thing I mentioned about these episodes before is that they're helpful not only because they clean up our game, but they kind of show you the mindset that I'm in and why certain things are better than other things, how we can use memory more effectively, and a lot of other benefits. So they're really useful even if you haven't been following the whole series. But with that stuff out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be working in both the code and the blueprints today. Let's start in the blueprints because I just want to make a few changes to our character blueprint. It'll be pretty quick. So if we go to blueprints, characters, base character BP, so we can scroll down here. And we have this event tick logic where we were making sure that we could get our characters, print out our other player's location on tick for some of the logic that we were testing earlier in the series, and I used it a few times, but at this point it can safely be removed. If you want to keep this debug code for yourself, that's perfectly fine, but at this point I have other methods of testing every single thing that we intended to use this for. So I'm just going to remove this and clean it up because if there's a lot of disconnected code in general, it can be removed. Another case is our keyboard mode here. So I have this comment about this keyboard mode hack where you can use either of these two methods depending on the issues you're having to fix some of your problems with keyboard mode and not being able to control both characters. And they were very useful. They are very useful. Many people still use them. I have my own method down here that I use in the tick function. Don't get rid of the actual logic that you're using, but if you have it commented here like I did, I've noticed a few people have done this. This is just for me. This is just a note that I had to show to other people, and at this point we've already updated this logic. I have record of this for people who join the community in earlier episodes, so we don't need to do all this. I don't need to have this disconnected logic here. Again, if you want to keep it for your reference, that's fine, but I'm trying to clean up my files so it is as clean as possible. At this point we can now go to the code. So in my case, I'm in Visual Studio, and we have our fighter template character.cpp and fighter template character.h. Now, first thing I want to do is scroll down to my move right function. And it is right here. Now, there are two if statements up at the top, checking for the base game instance and the player controller. We had used these at different points in the series, then we took out the things we needed from those classes, and we never took out the if statements. Now the base game instance could be useful in Move Right for 3D movement. I have a mini series on 3D fighters that I've been working on, and the base game instance stores if we're in fighter mode 3D, which basically just means we're in a 3D fighter, so we may need to check this to control our movement. So if you're following that series, you can go ahead and keep the if base game instance one, but I am going to remove the player controller one because we do not need access to the player controller in this function at all. You can go ahead and remove this if statement. It could be a little difficult because of how big this if statement is, so I'm going to put my mouse here and just follow it down to the curly brace. And I know this is the one associated with it, so I can get rid of that. And I can come up here to the top of Move Right and remove the if auto controller. And then I can auto format this file, or I can just select the space in between and get rid of it. Either way, just as long as I format it correctly. But there we go. So that change is pretty massive actually, because it really simplifies the move right quite a bit just by removing that one if statement. There are less checks every frame, there are less indents, less nesting going on here. Might do some miscellaneous cleanup on things like this. Just different logs and different if statements, just so I can see everything more clearly on my screen. These are in take damage. You can also do it in the middle of a log just by pressing enter and then adding a new quote down here and pressing space on the previous line and ending the quote. So we'll still print the same string. It's basically just taking two different strings and putting them together. We can do the same thing here, and you'll notice this is still in take damage, but I can do space, quote, and then quote on the next line. Then end stun has a few as well that we could consolidate. Can cancel out a last command. That's a pretty long one. Then if we go to fighter template character.h, there is a variable in here I know I want to remove. So earlier in the series, I was playing around with a boolean called isAI. I made this to determine if the character was controlled by AI or not, and it was useful for some tests for me, but then we updated the series and we added an actual AI player controller, and that means we don't need to check this in the character because anything that we're receiving from the AI should be going through the controller. So if you have any reason to keep this, such as you want to display something on the character differently, you could keep this boolean, but I don't want to actually do that. I would rather use the player controller for everything instead of checking for it in two spots. So I'm removing that variable entirely, and if I'm using it anywhere in here, I want to remove that as well. So isAI is false here in the initializer list, or the constructor body if you did not convert to initializer lists. You can go ahead and remove that and you'll see it's not used anywhere. We can play the game and make sure it's not being used. So let's go ahead and launch and verify this. So now I'm back in the editor and I'm playing the game, and you'll notice that everything is working fine. That's because we weren't using the isAI boolean at all anymore, and removing it was safe. So if we go back into our base character BP, now there is a really good improvement I want to make here, and that is with our set X attack effects and reset X attack effects. These two events are for triggering the material changes that we have on our characters for when we use what we call X attacks, which are these special moves. Essentially, they are the same as regular attacks, but they're powered up. So we have to use some super meter for them and usually hold a different input. Now you'll see these don't have anything, but if we go into something like our mutant BP, which is a child of base character BP, these classes override those events and have the actual logic in here. However, there's not a lot of need to do this because we can do everything in the base character BP and just make sure that we have the right materials in each character blueprint. So instead of hard coding these values and repeating the logic and then having the base character BP not have any logic at all, we can just simply condense this into one set of logic for each of these events and call it in one place, and we'll be good to go. We don't have to override it for each character. So just to show you a visual demonstration of what I'm actually talking about here, when we get into our game, if I give myself full super all, which means both characters have super meter, I have enough to perform my X attack, and we get this little red glow around our character. The other character can do it too, and they have a special material just because I made them fully new materials, which you don't have to do. If you know enough about materials, you can just edit the material or change the properties of the material to do this. But using the system we have in place is perfectly fine, and you may want to change your entire material depending on the needs of your game, so that's still valid. But we want to make sure that we are doing it in a way that is clean and easy. We don't have to edit it for each character or for each blueprint, because I think that's kind of ugly. So I'm going to copy the behavior from the mutant BP into my base character BP, and I'm going to show you here that we have the material slot, so we can drag off the material here and promote this to a variable that is a material, or we can just make our own variable by going plus variable, select the material type, and then we can set it to be an array or a single type depending on how we want to do this, and it will plug into here perfectly. Now the reason this is important is because we don't need to hard code the material in the set material node like we were doing. We can set it on this variable or in this array that we set up and just always access the right materials. That way when the character blueprints set the values in their blueprint, so if the mutant BP has different values than the Vanguard BP, for example, the logic will be the same. we're still going to use the right material for a different character. And so we can use this palette index to get the value within the array that we want to access. So you'll notice before we were using a switch statement on the palette index and we were hard coding it that way. If we fill out our array, fill out the default values of our array and use the palette index to access the element of that array, then we would be able to do the same thing. So you watch me make a material array, or an array of materials that I called X materials. Then I get it and I drag off of it, get a copy specifically, and I pass in palette index. Whatever the result is at palette index is the material that we want to use. But we have to fill these values out. So if we click on the X materials variable and go to the details panel and select the same materials that we had in our hard-coded slots on our mutant BP, this will be the same thing as when it was in the mutant BP. And that means we can remove the two events, the set X attack effects and reset X attack effects, from the mutant BP and really all children classes, and just use this logic right here. But even this can be improved further, because we can just have materials on the character class. This does not have to be part of the character blueprint, as maybe we want to do these things in the code. So we can scroll down to where we want this array to be. Basically, these are going to be the materials for when we're performing X attacks. So we want to change the materials on the character mesh during these attacks. We want to make sure that this is U property of edit anywhere, blueprint, read, write. We're only going to edit them in the defaults panel, so you could do edit defaults only, but I will make it edit anywhere for the time being. That way you have full control. Put it under the category X attacks, and we're going to make a T array of U material, and we're going to call it X attack materials. And don't forget to make the U material a pointer by putting the asterisk in the T array there. I missed that at first, but got that fixed up. Then once you do that, you can come in and delete the one that we made earlier while I was explaining the process. We don't need this X materials array that we made in the blueprint. Instead, we're going to use our new array. So we can get our X attack materials that we made in the code. This is our T array. And we can drag off of this and get a copy. Get a copy, and then we can pass in palette index. So palette index is basically what skin we are, and we have a couple for each of our characters, but the mutant has that regular color and the gray color, so those are different palettes in this case. So we're going to pass that in, and we don't need two different set materials now. We can just do the same logic for every material that we have. So this very simple logic, we're getting our array, we're getting the palette index, and then we're using the material at that index to set that as the slot on the mesh. But we have to make sure that this array has the proper variables. So we want to make sure we set the same ones we were hard coding, which are my glowing mutant and glowing mutant 2 values. You use your materials, whatever those values are. Make sure you put them in the same order, because we are working off that same order. So whatever is the proper index in the switch statement that we had is now going to be the index in the array, but it's going to be the same index, it's going to be using the same variable, so we're not going to have to change any logic to accommodate that. Now if we test our game again, you'll see that the effects work perfectly fine, just as expected. This is great because that means what we did worked. And since it worked, we can also do it for the reset X attack effects as well. So we can go back into the code and we can make an array for this. So I'll go to the same spot. These will just be the default materials to apply to the character mesh. It'll be the same U property. And I'm going to put it in the category materials. I'm going to change the other category of the X attack materials variable to also be in materials, so we can just find these quickly together. If we ever want to change them, they're both right there, very simple to find. And we'll call it T array, U material, pointer, mesh materials. And then once we make this variable, we can go ahead and launch again. Then we can come back into our character blueprint, and we basically want to do the exact same logic we just did, just using our new array. So now we can get our mesh materials. So we can fill out our default values in here. And for me, that is mutant_m. I have a lot of these. We're going to clean this up too, so we only have one, but it doesn't matter. Just make sure you pick the same material that you had in the previous logic for reset X attack effects in those set material nodes. And I know my other one is m_mutant2. So there we go. These are my default materials, and I can get the value at the index of palette index. And that means I can get rid of the switch statement, which means I can also get rid of one of the set material nodes because we don't need both of them. We only need one. We will plug it into set material, and now we have reset X attack effects is working too. You could even simplify this further, but this will be good for now. This is significantly better. Now make sure your other character blueprints don't have the set X attack effects and reset X attack effects in there, because now the parent or the base character BP will be handling all of that. Test your logic again and everything should be working as expected. And you can see that it is. Now to finalize what we're doing here, we should go back into our base character BP one more time and go to our X attack materials and clear this out, because the base character BP is meant to be the parent of all the other character BPs. So neither this nor the regular mesh materials array should have anything in it. Clear both of them out, which will update the defaults for all the children, and then we can go into each child. I'll just do it for mutant BP because this is the only one we were doing it for so far in the series. And we want to open up X attack materials and mesh materials in the details panel under class defaults, and we want to set these materials in here. So while we are the mutant class, these are the materials that will be used. If we are the mannequin or the vanguard class, then other materials will be used. And in the base character BP, you may want to check and make sure that the specific index from palette index is supplied by those material slots. Make sure it's valid before using it. But for now, that is always the case, so we can just go ahead and continue like this. Then do another test with these changes to make sure this is also working, which you will see that it is. Now there's one other thing I want to fix up in here since we saw it while we were changing the X attack effects, and that was that I have a lot of mutant_m, which is my default material for the mutant, and I really don't need a lot of these. The reason that I have so many is because when I was importing certain animations, I imported the skeletal mesh, which included the materials with it. And it's not really hurting our logic or anything, but it does add bloat to the project and also can make it confusing if I make one change to a certain material. It doesn't get applied to the other versions of that material. So one thing we can simply do is just start deleting them from left to right. We find the one that we want to keep. I want to keep the rightmost one because it is actually in a proper folder name. I called it texture materials. I can just right click and delete, or I can click on them and press the delete key. And some of them will let you, some of them you may have to replace references for. So as I'm deleting these, you'll see references are coming up. I just go down to this bottom left drop down section and I select the proper material, the one I want to keep. That is in the one that I like the path of, which is again that texture materials. And I select replace references, which means it's going to delete this asset and replace it with the one I've selected. We want to do this for all of them until we only have one left. And I want to rename it as well to m_mutant, which makes more sense because that is using the material prefix, which is m. Then I'm underscoring it to give it the actual name. So this is the material for the mutant. So I'm testing and everything works as expected. I hope you enjoyed this episode on cleaning up your character blueprint. We had a lot of really good improvements in this one, and we're continuing to get better and better. If you enjoyed this episode and you've been enjoying the series, then please subscribe. It benefits me a ton and the channel a lot, so I really appreciate it, and it's completely free. Additionally, if you want to support the channel further, then you can check out the Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriptions and get some benefits along the way. If you ran into any trouble following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I would be happy to help you out, and that support is completely free. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.